when you're ready.
Well, now it's time for one of our regular series of interviews, and I'm delighted to be joined in the Llanelli Talking News with the Blind studio by Mr. Roger Stephens. Welcome, Roger.
Thank you, Robert.
Nice to see you. Yeah, indeed. We're old friends, in fact, because we're both members of Llanelli Rotary Club, and Llanelli Rotary Club has supported the Talking Newspaper for the Blind over the years, and it was very generous, actually, to the Talking News for the Blind when it first started some 20-odd years ago. But you haven't been a member that long, but you've come to talk to us a little bit now about Llanelli Rotary Club's work on an international level.
That's right, Rob. Yes, I was invited to join the club about 5 or 6 years ago now. One or two apprehensions initially, wondering what they did. And I must admit, it seemed rather slow getting off the ground a little bit from my perspective, wanting to help in the community. And funny I say, wanting to help in the community, actually now I'm seen to be doing more with projects abroad as such, because after a talk to us at club one evening back a few years ago, I was very taken by Shelter Box, which is one of the things I'll address today with you, if I may. And it's a very people-friendly box. It helps people abroad, which we'll go into in some depth. So I do find, 6 years I've gone down the road, done a little bit, and I'm now actively involved. I like to think so anyway.
So you member Rotary for 6 years, and what enticed you to join, really? And
it's a combination of things, really. I was in a fortunate situation where I'd managed to retire from work early, pension payable, I will add.
Yeah.
Which is a
what
great
did you do then,
touch.
Roger?
I used to work for Welsh Water.
Right.
And its predecessors. I was in the personnel department.
Right.
And had an offer for an early retirement soon after my 50th birthday. And at that time, my very dear mother-in-law lived with us, and she needed a carer. My wife, unfortunately, wasn't in a position to leave work at the time. I had the offer, so I took it.
Right.
And I'm pleased to say I spent many a happy year until her passing, unfortunately, and then I was invited to join the club.
Right.
So it gave an interest, it gave me something to do, and I would like to think that I've thrown myself into it wholeheartedly and become an active member.
Because it's got this motto, isn't it, service above self, and that's something you aspire to?
Oh, absolutely. I think if you can't give something back after the years we've been on this planet, on this earth, and help people, then it's a sad reflection on us all, really, and I don't think we've achieved something in life. And I'm not talking about career goals here now. I'm talking about personal goals where you get a lot of satisfaction by sitting down and thinking, I helped somebody today. Whether it costs money or not is irrelevant. It's helping somebody who is probably not as fortunate as I, and I love the opportunity to go and do things. It's not the international project that I just mentioned, Shelter Box. Whilst I can't help people specifically, I do fundraise for them, but I do a lot of, as a speaker for Shelter Box, I do a lot of imparting information, like today, where I will inform people as to what Shelter Box does, etc., etc., and that in its indirect way helps as well.
Okay, and you're living in the very fashionable metropolis of Five Roads.
Oh, absolutely. Is there any other place, we started off in town, a towny boy I am, opposite the bus stop of Warren Bread in Robertson Street there. And after I got married, I was living, believe it or not, just down the road from this studio, about 5 or 6 doors down in Princess Street. After we got married, we knew mother-in-law had to come and live with us, and where she lived wasn't suitable, where we lived wasn't suitable, so plot of land, got a back-breaking work and bum-kicking from my dear wife, and we built a house.
Good.
And that's the story, but yes, metropolis by all means.
And in Llanelli Rotary Club, then you're what they call the chairman of the foundation committee, as
That's
I
right,
understand.
yes. I was asked to take over the chair of foundation. Foundation itself is Rotary's own charity, as you're probably aware. And without that charity, all the monies that are channeled into Rotary from all angles go into foundation, as it's called. It's through foundation then that we manage to finance all local projects in the community, international projects, students travelling abroad, peace fellowships, a whole range of activities is all financed through foundation itself.
Right, so it's got quite a big remit then, and quite a lot of topics for you to cover.
It's got a remit, but it's an empowering remit in some instances, because it embarks on a system where it lets people do things. Without it, people like yourself will get involved actively in the community, but we need finances and what have you to support it, and it's through that avenue that these monies come then.
The shelter box has become quite a little baby for you in a way, isn't it?
I love it. I got to be honest. It's not a little baby because the thing's about 4 foot by 3 foot because it's a fairly hefty big box and it's difficult to put in the car on your own, yes, but it has become very dear to me for 2 reasons. It's a practical thing. I can see it, I can handle it, I can touch it, and it's things like that I enjoy at the practical side as opposed to just the talking side as such, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And it's very dear to me. I do quite a number now of presentations, hopefully to schools, clubs, and various things like that.
And the box itself, it's a big green box, bigger than a sort of hamper, bigger than a large suitcase, but it will fit into the back of a car, basically.
Oh, yes, just about it.
Yeah.
Small cars probably a little bit difficult, but yes, believe it or not, when you get it, it's packed full of all life-saving and shelter equipment. And once you unpack it, because it's all shrink-wrapped initially when you get it, it doesn't go back in the box. But the boxes themselves are quite remarkable. In places around the world with disaster zones where they've been delivered to, they're used for cribs, babies sleep in them. They're used as water containers because they're totally sealed around the outside. Kennels, chickens, you name it. There's a whole host of uses that these boxes are put to when they're out there.
Yeah. Nobody wants to see sort of tragedies in the world and disasters and all that, but this is when things like shelter box actually come into their own, basically. That if we have an earthquake or if there are tsunamis, then that's when shelter box kicks in?
Absolutely. Shelter box started off about 1999. A gentleman, a Rotarian as well, from the Helston Club down in Cornwall. At that time, he was a retired search and rescue naval diver. And he'd been on many missions around the world where aid had to go in, and he did really notice that there was a distinct shortage in the materials that were taken in. Naturally, foods and medicines were in abundance, but he saw that the people there had lost their homes, they had no dignity with their lives, they had nothing to build a shelter, no tent, nothing whatsoever. So that's when he went back and sought some guidance from various clubs and manufacturers regarding equipment, and the idea of shelter box was conceived. Right. And just to sum it up, he likes, Tom Henderson, his name is, he actually deemed shelter box as being an international disaster relief charity that provides emergency shelter and life-saving supplies for families around the world who are affected by disasters and, most importantly, at the time when they need it most.
Yeah, so it actually gets these disasters very quickly. And
it can get shelter boxes have been known to get on the ground, particularly Haiti was one of the most recent disasters, and that's in everybody's mind still, despite there being 1 or 2 since. But Haiti had shelter boxes actually on the ground and tents erected within 24 hours, believe it or not, because there are 3 or 4 strategic locations around the world that store shelter boxes, and Rotary clubs can get access to them fairly easily.
So what happens? You pop the lid open on one of these boxes, and what's inside is a
whole host of things inside. As I say, it provides emergency shelter and life-saving supplies. So naturally, there's a tent. It's a fairly large tent. It's been specifically designed and remanufactured now. We're on Mark 6 over the 10-year period the shelter box has been running, or 12-year period the shelter box has been running. There's a tent that can sleep a family of up to 10. It can be compartmentalised inside to give a little bit of privacy for children and grannies and various things like that. There's blankets. There are not sleeping bags, but a waterproof base underneath to sleep on, rather. Scarves, hats, gloves, cooking utensils, stainless steel dishes and plates and pots, a cooker to give warmth and heat. There's a whole host of things. Even tools are thought of, rope for a makeshift line, for example, for hanging clothes up, water containers, purifiers, mesh to mosquito nets. But naturally, dependent upon the location of the disaster, then the equipment is
flexible.
It's very, very flexible. It's got to be. No point sending mosquito nets out to places that's freezing cold, for example,
But there's quite a bit of attention to detail as well, I think, in the fact that I've seen boxes that contain colouring books for children to keep children occupied. And
very true. Again, if they are disasters where families are particularly affected, then every shelter box will contain a little child's pack, which is crayons, as you say, colouring books, they're still going to have life carrying on. And for a lot of children, schooling is very, very important around the world. They realise that as well. Maybe not like some of the kids over here who take the opportunity of not going to school. Children out there want to go. They want to carry on and get their lives back to normality as soon as possible. So, yes, crayons, colouring books, geometry sets, pencils, rubbers, all the general things that go out. And every 50th box that goes there, there's a special teacher's pack as well that contains books and special equipment for the teachers then to carry on with lessons.
It's a very worthwhile project. I just wondered, Roger, how much does each box cost then in terms of...
Total cost of the box, including all the equipment that I've mentioned before, is £590. That works out, if you consider a family of up to 10 living in, let's take an average figure of about 6 months, that works out at just 32 pence per person per day to offer a family, an extended family, dignity, shelter and warmth. And that's quite amazing when you think about it.
You mentioned briefly about Haiti. What are the names of the other places that these boxes have been sent to?
In just 2000, soon after Shelter Box was commissioned, the first boxes were delivered to India and Pakistan. And since then, it is funny, people talk about disasters seemingly on the increase and global climate changes, etc. Over the years, Afghanistan, Algeria, Gaza, Indonesia, on several occasions, China, Cuba, and the list goes on. Even some of the non-third world countries like New Zealand and Australia, notably in recent years. But there are far more disasters occurring. It's quite surprising. Whether it is a climate change, I know not.
Yeah, but that's interesting about New Zealand because that was the earthquake, I think, was it in Christchurch?
Absolutely, very right. We saw the pictures on television. And that's one of the things we don't appreciate, really, what it's like in these countries because a lot of them, they don't have the communication network that New Zealand and Australia had and managed to give us pictures. A lot of these places, there's absolutely zero communications. The people that go out there on behalf of Shelter Box to help set up the equipment and instruct the people in their use of the boxes are often in situations and in disaster zones where they're seeing bodies, unfortunately, that are starting to rot. It's not a very pleasant environment. They have no communication with the outside world. They can't contact their families themselves to tell them that they're okay. It's quite a hostile environment. And, when we think that these poor people live out there all the time, we go in for a couple of weeks, so to speak, to help them. And even struggling there, we're limited to 2 weeks in there on the ground because of the conditions. There's no medical treatment centres as such as we would know it. So it's a difficult situation.
Well, Roger, I know you do a lot of work and you go around to schools and all that, giving talks and on Shelter Box. I wish you all the very best for the project and all the best to Llanelli Rotary Club and its efforts internationally with Shelter Box. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Rob. It's my pleasure coming here today, and I wish everybody, all your listeners, an enjoyable time.
Good.
Thank you.